Thank you, Jeff. It's a big pleasure and honor to share the stage with you this year. Wow, it's my very first CloudFest, and so far it has been an exciting and amazing experience. And great things have been going on here during the past 3 days already. So the 4th edition of the CloudFest Hackathon is a wrap, and I can promise you the results are going to be mind-blowing. So, over the past 3 days, over 90 attendees have been working on 7 projects. And first of all, we want to give you an impression, some video impressions, so you can see for yourself. Looks amazing, right? We had a lot of fun, I can tell you. And we had 30% more attendees than last year, and lots of pizza and coffee were needed to keep the hacking processes going. Right now, we want to welcome our awesome project leads on stage to share with you what they have been accomplishing with their teams. So the first project we're going to talk about is the Domain Connect project. So please give it up for Arnold Blin from GoDaddy.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to talk about our project. Before I talk about it, I want to tell people in the audience, in case they don't know what Domain Connect is, what it's about. Domain Connect is an open standard. It's been around for about 2 or 3 years that makes it easy for a user to configure an online service like an email or website service provider to set up DNS for their domain. Typically, that's a very hard process for users. They get confused about A records, C names, MX records. And Domain Connect makes it easy, where the user can click a simple set of, can do it with one click and confirm the change, and the changes are written to DNS. The core of the open standard is that services represent their DNS settings in these things called templates that encapsulates all the DNS changes that the service needs to operate. And after the user consents, as I said, the changes are applied. A short history of the standard. It was created by GoDaddy initially in 2014, 2015 for our own use, when we realized that it would be useful to the services if they could work with more than just GoDaddy. So we showed up at the hackathon here at CloudFest in 2016 and 2017, and started working with the folks from 1&1 and United Domains and helped them add support for Domain Connect to their service. We also built a great example program of how services can implement the protocol, and that's live on the internet at the URL on the screen. Last year at the hackathon, we moved things forward more. We started working with the team from Plesk and added support for the protocol to them as a DNS provider. We also built a really cool little applet that did dynamic DNS on a PC. And so what did we do this year? So this year, we decided the missing component was some example code and libraries to make it easy for the DNS providers to onboard with the protocol. So we built a package. It's up on GitHub, fully compliant with the protocol, that allows a DNS provider to deal with all the hard problems they have to deal with when implementing the protocol. The main thing that it does is it deals with taking a template, all the runtime variables associated with it, looks at the zone that exists and figures out how to apply the template to the zone. And that's a slightly complex problem because it involves both the addition and deletion of DNS records. Using this library, we implemented 3 proof of concepts, one with cPanel, one with bind, and one with power DNS. A little bit of nod to the next project as I wrap up, we even enabled it to work as an easy way to set up the ID for me protocol, which you're going to learn about from our next project.
Thank you, Arnold. So that was already a good start, right? A lot they have been accomplishing. So let's see what we have next. I think you missed a slide. So the next project we're going to be talking about is, as you can see, the ID for me plugin Fiesta. You call it plugin Fiesta, right? Yeah. So please give it up for Paweł Kowalik from HackMyHost.
Right. Good morning, everyone. So, okay, this is changing. All right. So the project was really called Plugin Fiesta because we expected it to be a party where we can fix the login. Fixing the login is the mission of ID for me, to give the same functionality of all the social logins, but without the social part. But the user is able to decide where he is holding his data, how is the, it's not too loud. Okay, how is the handling done? What is your provider of your login? And that all these choices are done by the user. Basically, what we want to achieve is that all the applications we use in the internet, in the hosting industry, are enabled with ID for me, so that the login problem is solved once for all. And we were really, really surprised what was the response from the developer community that we had in the hackathon. The ID for me ecosystem consists of few roles. The role of login partner, which is basically offering this login button, and the other parties, which are the other side, issuing the federated identities. So as you can see, we had amazing set of projects. We had WordPress, we had Joomla, we have Typo3, Symfony. Also, Plone was also there. And we also worked on the libraries to enable different programming languages in Go, and Java, and .NET, Django, Python with Django, Flask, Tornado. The Flask was there as well to support it on the platform as a login for the users. And we also had a solution working on Nginx, which is completely independent from the application layer. On the other side, we had Copano and GoDaddy working on their authority side. We had Denic testing their Denic ID solution with all these parties integrating the login button. And just to give you some impressions, we had in the end many working solutions after just 2 days of coding. So to summarize what we achieved, we had 18 participants in the hackathon project. There was 12 relying party integrations, 2 authority side integrations, and 11 projects already delivered a working solution during these 2 days. So the protocol proved not only the usefulness, the very good response from the community about the solution, but also that it really keeps to its promise. It's federated. It can be easily integrated between different providers, and it works.
Wow. All this in only 2 days. It's incredible. Thank you, Paul. Amazing. So, the next project we're going to talk about is the ISMP project, which is, I have to check it up here, It is the Application Server Management Protocol. And please welcome on stage Anna Schlesser from Bright Nucleus.
Thank you. So we worked on a pretty new idea. It's called the Application Server Management Protocol, and it's basically meant to provide a protocol that can bridge the gap between an application and the server it is running on in terms of enabling management operations. The way this works is that this operation can be split up between the initiative that stays with the user of the application, who has the legal responsibility still of initiating an action, and the actual execution that is in complete control of the server or the hosting provider where the application is running on. So it's a concerted operation that gets rid of the problem that the hosting provider, for example, cannot just run updates that might break the site if the user has not agreed, and the user cannot agree when they don't know what it's all about. So we wanted to bridge that gap. Some example use cases are when you install something like WordPress or Joomla and it has some specific requirements, it can already have a small chat with the server that it needs to run on to make sure that all the requirements are met. So this allows the server to already make the necessary changes automatically. We can provide functionality like allowing the user to just update their PHP version, and this would, for example, let us integrate into the WordPress auto-update mechanism, which currently covers the core, the plugins, and the themes, and allow us to extend this to cover the entire server stack. So imagine if you want to install a web application as an end user, not a systems engineer, and you could just rely on the application to make sure that your entire server stack just always runs in a secure and fast way, and you can just rely on it making the needed changes as you go along. So just a quick example of how this would look for the protocol. We have basically three main endpoints. The first one is a check endpoint. So the check endpoint lets the application state components and their constraints. And the constraints can be arbitrarily defined. It's a very basic, very simplistic protocol. It can be very bulky depending on what you will send over, but this is about machine-to-machine communication. So it's not about saving typing work, it's about making sure that the implementations can be reliably implemented across all systems. And then the server will respond back with what it considers the best solution that meets all of the requirements, all of the constraints that were sent. So the application sends the exact requirements, this is the range that we can work on. The server responds, this is the best version right now. And then the next endpoint would be a change request, where basically the response from the server can be fed into the next request as what the application wants to achieve. This will be an asynchronous request, so the application sends a call back together with the change request. And once everything has proceeded on the server side, it can call this callback and state what has happened, and it will include a rollback ID. So the application can then run tests and, if needed, do a rollback automatically. In case the server is not able to get the communication going again with the application, it will fall back to an automatic rollback. During the hackathon, we could achieve a lot of things for this specific project. First of all, we were working on a draft RFC. We will continue working on this and hopefully engage the entire RFC official process for making this a valid standard. We created a draft OpenAPI 3.0 definition, which allowed us to build a PHP client, a library, a PHP sample server. We managed to get the communication going between these two. We built a testing environment with a WordPress plugin and this sample server that do the communications, where we had a graphical user interface and a console interface working. And now we decided on establishing a working group and working on taking this forward, finishing the RFC, and then hopefully bringing this into a state where we can contact official authorities, the IETF and similar, to hopefully get this to be considered one of the ways to manage a server. Yeah. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We're looking forward to see what your group is going to achieve in the future with this. This is exciting. So, and because it was a hackathon, we're going to see and welcome on stage now my lovely colleague Jan Löffler from Plask, who is going to talk about the HackMyHost project.
So who of you has a website? Hands up. All right. And who feels well protected by your hosting company? That's only a few, half of them. Yeah, maybe you should look twice. It's not always the case. So you could think hosting companies are tech companies, right? So they provide you with the latest and greatest software stack, always the latest version, fully proven, most modern protocols. They outphase all the old crap that you don't use anymore. They test against vulnerabilities. They clean your web space from malware and all that stuff. At least you could think so. Unfortunately, reality is somewhat different. And our team had the target to benchmark the most popular hosting companies in the world and really see how much they do for the security of their users, how much they take care of their users. And we wanted to really see who's the role model and what are they doing great and what can the others learn. And so we started to write down a security checklist, and we put that on github.com as open source so that everybody can see. We wrote scripts for intrusion tests to really see how far hosting companies go in protecting their customers. Let's look at the details. So in the security checklist, we reviewed web server, PHP, and database settings. We reviewed and tested all the SSL certificates, if there were any. We checked the password security and authentication methods. And we have written own scripts for intrusion tests, performed them everywhere. We uploaded malware to test if some hosts react and protect us from doing this so. The interesting and unexpected thing was that we actually wasted a lot of time on Saturday by becoming customer. I thought like, okay, here's my money, take it. That should be a simple thing. But in reality, it's not. Actually, some hosting companies make it really difficult to become a customer. There was one, and I'm not mentioning names, that even asked us to send a picture of our credit card and send it via email. Guess what? I will do that right now. Of course, I won't. So yeah, that was the host that we couldn't test afterwards because we didn't have a contract. But we also found one PCI DSS violation, which is not really good. And of course, we don't disclose this information because that's critical. But there were a lot of other issues as well, and most were with outdated versions of software, which can be easily hacked. And so let's have a look at the summary. And this is only an excerpt of the results that were produced. There's tons of more stuff, and we don't go into detail. We don't want to blame other hosts, so we're not mentioning them here. But what I would like to point out is there are, for example, two role models, and the best ones were HostPress from Germany and Kinster, the managed WordPress hoster. So they have done really great in terms of security. This is where others can learn from. And yeah, I was actually surprised how easy it is to get confidential information and exploit web spaces by just misusing vulnerabilities in outdated software. And what we want to do here is we want to really team up, contact those hosting companies, help them to get better. And if somebody here is working for a hosting company and you want to talk with us about best practices and how to do things better, then just approach us and we'll help you to take more care of the security of your users. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. And Jan's team has been uniting forces with another team who was checking the usability when it comes to hosting plans. And Mark Nelius from WP Wartung 24 is now going to be on stage to share the results of this team. Welcome, Mark.
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, as Carol already explained, we joined forces with Jan and the HackMyHost team to check hoster configuration stuff. Hosters typically use different kind of configuration control panels for the configuration environment, especially for shared hosting. Some of them you might know because they are, for example, Plesk or cPanel or something like that, or they are individual solutions. And probably you had already configuration pitfalls trying to find a special setting in a special control panel environment because it was in a completely unexpected place or it wasn't there at all, or enabling a setting had complete different effects than you expected. And the Hoster WTF project tries to help at this point. We try to find all these pitfalls, list them, and help the users and the hosting companies to prepare to make it a better configuration environment. So what did we do? So this is what I talked about. What did we do at the hackathon? Our goal was to define a list of quality criteria for shared hosting environments, especially regarding easy registration and onboarding process, end-user support, and the technical environment. This also especially regarding open source content management systems. So we created that list and tested against 7 shared hosting providers, German hosting providers, international ones, and special WordPress managed hosting providers. And as Jan already told in his talk before, it was not that easy to get registered with all these hosters. So that was the first problem we faced. And for our midterm goal is to also add a ranking to the list of details we created and to provide a comparable list with all these things and questions we checked, and provide additional help for you as the user and also for the hosters. And I have some small examples about what we, for example, found. And that should not be a bashing for the hosters you probably recognize at the screenshot, but there is just examples for all the things that you might find typically if you're working in a shared hosting environment. So this one is a German managed WordPress hosting provider and the dashboard. And we registered there an account and created a new WordPress instance. And immediately after the instance was created, the dashboard showed us that there are updates available for this WordPress installation. So the expected behavior would be that if I create a WordPress instance and it is immediately after this instance is created, there should be no update available because I want to have a latest version installed as my WordPress system. And then you can recognize this because this is a funny thing. It's a GoDaddy login page, and we try to register an account at GoDaddy. And we always registered a domain together with the account, and typically took something like hostersecurityhostername.com. That worked for all other hosters, but not for GoDaddy, because they block you if you try to register a domain with their own name inside. The problem is they don't tell you. So you get blocked by trying to log in, and you can't log in, and you don't know why. Yeah, so typically you don't use GoDaddy in your domain name, but was a funny thing. And the last one is about PHP versions as an example. This is the list of available PHP versions at a hoster, and that is 5.4, 5.6, and 7.0. So all 3 unsupported old versions, and there's no possibility for a supported version, to choose a supported version. And that's also typically also, I think Jan has that as a result of his team, that many hosters still provide old PHP versions. So the expected behavior would be to have at least one supported version of PHP. So, yeah. So that was the Hoster WTF project, and we think we have a lot to do at this point, and there are many opportunities for the next hackathons. Thank you.
Good to hear. Thank you, Mark. So the next project is the deep learning project from Edge to Cloud Analytics. And please give it up for Marcel Wagner from Intel.
Thank you. Thank you, Carol. Yeah, this is about deep learning. And you see this is a team. So it's all about hackers and coming together. And it's pretty big, 20 people, or almost 20 people, and 19 people. But at the same time, the challenge or the project was also pretty challenging, because what we wanted to create was an open source framework where we can combine edge artificial intelligence and cloud artificial intelligence, which is deployable everywhere, independent of cloud service providers. So the only precondition should be there should be Kubernetes available. And of course, we wanted to take all those projects which are proven in this area and bring them together and show how create recipes and show how they work together. Edge to cloud, yeah. What is this? Yeah, edge is close to where the content is created. So, for instance, you have video or sensor data, and you want to decide on the edge where it is meaningful for the cloud or whether not. So you want to filter it, process it, and only send the relevant information to the cloud. And then at the same time, you want to connect it securely to the cloud and do specific or different artificial intelligence pipelines to analyze the data. So this is the high-level overview of the architecture you can see. On the left side, on the edge, we used OpenVINO, which is an inferencing framework where you can draw conclusion on images, which can run on different kind of hardware, from FPGA, CPUs, GPUs, on specialized neural network hardware. This was getting the streams, analyzing them, cutting out, and send only the information which is relevant to the cloud, using the OpenIoT service platform, which has been developed also at this hackathon 2 years ago as a way to manage devices. It's also an open source framework to manage devices, to connect them securely to the cloud, and also give access then to the cloud services to these devices. Then we used Kubeflow and TensorFlow on the cloud to create artificial intelligence pipelines. So we have the role of the data scientist who's configuring those roles, those pipelines, and, for instance, marketing access with a special UI to see whether specific campaigns were successful or not, and all runs on Kubernetes. Here you can see some examples. We took real hardware, put it around at the hackathon. The M images were analyzed. We cut out, for instance, the faces and created pipelines in the cloud and brought it all together. So what was the result? We created an application called Counting Happy People. So we put cameras everywhere, and we cut out only the faces, sent them to the service, and calculated checked whether they're happy or not, and created information about how many happy people have been there. And we used OpenVINO, as I said, to cut out the images. We used the OpenIoT service platform to manage the devices and provide the data to the cloud. We used Kubeflow, and we put everything on Kubernetes, on a vanilla Kubernetes cluster, so you can deploy it everywhere. And what can I say? We put the devices everywhere, and we counted over one day at the hackathon the faces, and we saw only happy faces everywhere. So the hackathon was really nice, and thank you very much, CloudFest.
Thank you, Marcel. And last but not least, we're going to talk about the so-called Nutshell project. It's a really creative name, and Stefan Luco from CMS Garden is going to tell you more about it now.
I've learned so much on this weekend. I never thought about it, that I had to learn so much. And I want to share with you some of the findings from our team. I have no idea, is there a team? No. There's no team photo. We had 5 people in the Nutshell project, and personally I thought that our project is not a problem because it's so old and so easy. There is no problem in the internet, but I've learned the internet is broken. Imagine your name in your local language and in your local characters. Imagine your name in your local language and local characters in email addresses. And try to figure out if there is any possibility to register an account. We try it, and no chance. Because Korean characters, Hindi characters, or Umlaute in German, like Sören or Müller, can't get through. I don't understand the problem, so we start to read about standards, and we had a deep dive, a really deep dive in the internet history. We started 1991 with the first specification of Unicode, and we stopped in 2015 as the Universal Acceptance steering group from ICANN was built to create awareness for the problem. So what kind of awareness? We tried it in 10 different open source content management systems, and the good part is 70% of the SMTP infrastructure is ready for universal acceptance, but 0% of the CMS allows some registered domains with that crazy email addresses. Why? That was all learning, because it's complicated. It's complicated from the form submit button, the way down to SMTP servers, transportation protocols, and so on. And it's not easy to test it, because if you try to send an email to Thomas Müller at CloudFest, Thunderbird tell you, oh no, it's not allowed. There is a special character. So you can't test it at the moment. And we had a long list, we created a long list with projects we want to talk about the specific problem to make the internet functional. So if you want to help us to make the internet a better place for local characters and local names, then go to uasg.tech and download really easy peasy quick starter guide and help, because it's necessary.
Definitely. Thank you, Stefan. So, with these amazing results, we're pretty much convinced that we're going to have the 5th edition happening in 2020, and we definitely count on you all, and we're looking forward to welcoming you next year as attendees or sponsors, maybe. So thank you for having been listening to the presentation of the hackathon results.